I'm just wondering, can you talk about a return of international travelers when China is still not traveling, is still holding on to its zero COVID policy?
It certainly seems strange. Good morning to you both. It seems odd to be talking about the return of international travel or the return of travel and tourism, given what's happening on the world stage at the moment. But what we are seeing is what had been pent-up demand and investment and rapid hotel openings. We ourselves opened more than 100 hotels last year in Asia Pacific alone. More than 400 globally has given way to pent-up travel demand. So it's going to sound odd to hear me say it, but booking pace is up year on year, 86%. And what that means is Omicron is moving through markets faster than we've ever seen before, and that is giving way to a pent-up travel demand that we in the industry had hoped for. As it relates to China, we need to remember that China is largely a domestic market, particularly for hotels. And although the outbound Chinese traveler and particularly the outbound group traveler has buoyed the entire industry, right, closed international borders in China and domestic travel can see that particular market be extremely healthy. Less so, of course, for markets like Southeast Asia and, of course, Hong Kong that rely heavily on inbound travel for recovery to take place.
Up 86% year on year, presumably from a pretty low base. Alan, I'm just wondering, when do you expect numbers to get back to pre-pandemic levels?
Yeah, it's a great question. Globally, I'll give you the global numbers. We finished 60% year-on-year growth, 21 versus 20. To give sense of momentum in Q4, that was 104% for the fourth quarter of last year, and that was back at 2019 levels. And as you'll remember, 2019 was a boom year and was talked as a golden year for travel and tourism. So many markets are already there, particularly the US markets and the Europe markets that are seeing leisure demand give way to business demand, and ultimately that will be group demand. Slower here in Asia Pacific given the inbound nature, but we're certainly, as I say, trending upward in just about every market that is opening, and in a shorter cycle of lockdown. And as you're well aware, VTL lanes or travel lanes and restrictions being lifted almost in every market with the exception of China at the moment.
Right. Alan, lots of problems for the hospitality space. We know that it's been settled with that labor shortage as well. What are you seeing for your own hotels?
Yeah, it's a great question. The subsidies in certain markets, particularly it's made headlines in the US, have seen a slow return to the industry, and perhaps the industry over the past 2 years being seen as unsafe. And at its worst, that saw some hotels in the US have a shortage of labor and not being able to trade at full occupancy. Pleased to say that from a Hilton perspective, we haven't experienced the disruption, nor have we in Asia Pacific. We've been fortunate that from a career perspective and from an ownership perspective, our owners have been fantastically supportive of team members, as has many governments here in the region. So we didn't see the great exodus from the industry, and we're fortunate to be named Great Places to Work's #1 hospitality company for the last 5 years. So we haven't had the disruption that perhaps some other markets have. So largely speaking, we're good to go, and we've been able to facilitate that demand as it started to roll back in.
Alan, is it now perhaps gone to perhaps on the improvement slope, as we've been discussing, as you said, 86% up. Is it now too late for you to see more consolidation in the industry, or is it actually ripe for further consolidation?
It's a great question. The talks of industry consolidation certainly were abundant in 2020, particularly for the publicly listed hotel companies. What we have seen is a lot of investment appetite into the industry, but we haven't seen any consolidation talks once it was clear that the larger hotel players were going to make it through the crisis. Investment dollars have gone back into building new supply. I mean, I mentioned we opened 100 hotels. We actually signed 249 hotels just in Asia Pacific last year, which brings our total trading and pipeline to 1,300. And we'll be opening one hotel every 4 days this year, which will be another record for us. So investment in travel and tourism, certainly, but it tends to be investment at this stage in physical hotels themselves, of which we've been the fastest growing. But a rising tide lifts all boats, and I have to say everybody in the industry is getting back to doing what we do best, which is sort of improving city skylines and bringing new products to market.
Okay, post-pandemic, how will a hotel experience differ to pre-pandemic times?
What we are seeing is this need for greater personalization, and we're utilizing technology to make it happen. So as customers sort of further demonstrate their preference for having a stay in a hotel their particular way, Hilton's been around for 102 years, and we've always prided ourselves on being reliable and friendly, which means being able to do things in the way that you want to do it. In this case, post-pandemic, particularly for those people that are still conservative to contact, that means products such as a digital arrival experience where you can check in via your Hilton Honors app, bypass the front desk, order room service if you want to be an isolationist in your room, check out on your phone, and depart. And should you choose to, not interact with anyone other than your own group in the stay. That product's been utilized heavily throughout the pandemic. And I do think it's going to be a trend both for convenience and for preference on a go-forward basis for people that are taking a more conservative approach as Omicron winds down and hopefully we end up in an endemic state.
Alan, just one final question before we let you go. There's been so much optimism. You expressed a lot of optimism. What do you see as the biggest risk?
Well, I think the biggest risk at the moment is a trust factor between certain countries with different approaches. I mean, for the world to get back to normal, we sit on the World Travel and Tourism Council, which is doing a great job in lobbying for recognition, which means a test for those countries that are requiring tests to travel is received on both sides. I think a lack of trust still permeates the industry, and there's still a fear in getting caught abroad and being quarantined and not being able to return home. So we do hope that PCR tests, if you will, give way to rapid tests, and that ultimately gives way to trust and vaccinations across the world so travel becomes friction-free. And it really is that needs to unlock for people not to have that fear, particularly business travelers, have that fear of being caught in a market that they intended to visit for 3 days, but not be able to board and get back to family for the weekend. But a trend I do think, and a word would like to introduce, is bleisure. What we are seeing is business travelers taking the opportunity to extend over the weekend, bring family, bring partners with them. So the business travel stay, we would expect, at least for the medium term, to be extended as people make good on that travel deficit. I would say in closing, revenge travel is a real thing, and I'm sure you, like me, can't wait to be part of it.
All right, Alan, thank you so much. Actually, no, I've got one question. What about business in Hong Kong? And, do you foresee some of your hotels being used ultimately for isolation of COVID patients and people who test positive? Is this on the agenda, and has the government approached you?
Rishaad, I knew you were going to ask me. I thought it was going to be up front and I was going to get away with it, with not answering it. Look, our hotels have always stood for shelter in a storm. Here in Singapore, our hotels were used as stay-at-home notices as we did what we could to support the government, help people isolate in a safe way. People appreciated, I suppose, Hilton and our competitors' approach to supporting the greater good. We're certainly open to supporting the government in Hong Kong. What we've seen with Omicron is a really quick cycle. And other markets, if you take Australia and India, it's lasted about 45 days of occupancy being disrupted. And in that time, we stand ready to help wherever we can. So that was a long answer to your question. In short, of course, we're prepared to help We want April 20th to be the date that international flights come back into Hong Kong. That's certainly the date and where they're restricted to at this stage, and we'll do whatever we can to help move that along.
Yes, no, the government approached you?
Yes, they've approached all hotels, and we'll participate as needed.